Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Vikashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin can and string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, here is my question to you. Which do you feel worse about? Putting out the Adrian Peterson trade rumor, or telling people to open their hearts up to hope?
Okay, first of all, I didn't put out the trade rumor, right? Okay, the rumor was out there. I, based off of several actual sources I had inside the building, reported that it was real. So I did something worse than put out the rumor. I broke news that did not turn out to be the case. I hate that it happened. It did the opposite of jumpstart my career, but I definitely, I regret that way more than the open your heart. Because I think that, like, in the piece, I end up saying, look, it's likely that they'll hurt you. That's the most likely outcome. But you're never going to enjoy seasons of football, especially winning ones, right? You're never going to enjoy a Super Bowl season in retrospect. You can't buy the joy back. And so you have to take the risk of being vulnerable in order to enjoy the moment instead of fearing, wins. So I don't regret that, actually. I knew that this was the most likely outcome. Maybe not in quite as a devastating fashion, but I don't know if that's actually worse, right? Like if the Vikings had lost on a missed field goal at the last second, if maybe that would have been worse than them just getting completely pasted and everyone checking out at the top of the fourth quarter when they ran the ball.
Yeah. I mean, there is certainly that, and there is something to be said, too, about the fact that it turned out that from the celebration and from what happened afterwards, the second Packers game really was our Super Bowl.
Yeah, which, hey, you can't take the two Super Bowls the Vikings won this year away from us.
I mean, if they're linear Super Bowl trophies, they do.
You literally can take portions of it, yes. But you can't take the full.
that's kind of the whole thing of the show.
No, the nature. No, I get what I said. Yeah, but you can't take the whole of them.
Okay, the fact the games happened, people were there.
The games have already happened, right? And
not a conspiracy. People aren't staying quiet or being really like attached to the lie or anything.
Yeah, the decay function is already beginning on the Super Bowl. So, although I guess the Rams have them now, so I guess never mind, they were taken away.
Oh,
no, the Lions have them.
Oh,
geez. I forgot how the linear Super Bowl worked for a second. Yeah, actually, the Lions took both trophies, I want to say.
Yeah.
Or did the Rams take the first one and the Lions take the second one?
Well, let's get into this game.
Well, they're gone now, is what we're getting at.
It's unfortunate. We're obviously, the Vikings lost. You're aware of that because you're a human being who pays attention to Viking sports media and football games and whatnot. So this is the aftermath. This is the after episode. As we've done so many times over the years, the Vikings have lost in the playoffs and are now out. This was a fine football team for most of the regular season. And then turn to this. So we'll be getting into what happened and a extensive mailbag. But before we start, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. As we are now in the off season for Minnesota, we will be posting less frequently. It'll probably end up being somewhere between once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks, depending on where we are in the desert that is off-season news. So when something interesting happens, we will be there, or we'll just be there in a month going, all right, so the whole JJ McCarthy thing, like, is he, are we going to do that? Or are we going to end up doing something with Sam Darnold? He's now going to be the best person on the entirety of the quarterback, or the best quarterback in the Raiders. Like, what are we doing? So we'll be talking about that as the season goes on, but we will be decreasing the frequency of our posts because we are not Luke Braun, and nor do we aspire to be.
Thank God for it. Yeah.
Nor do we aspire to be. So he can have his thing, we will have ours, and we will be posting less frequently. So with that, if you'd like to support us, if you'd like bonus episodes that come out fairly often, you can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the bonus episodes, you get access to the Discord, all of that. Or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or go to norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful Norse Code merchandise items, t-shirts, baby onesies, all of that. The Reef Wiggler stickers are over at the Threadless store. All right. If I may, I'd like to rant for just... I don't ask for permission on this show very often, but I'd just like to rant for just a moment.
It is really more your show. But yeah, no, go ahead.
People famously listen to this show for my football thoughts, okay? I don't know... I don't know what
I'm just saying you're running point on the show, right? So like you can't just do it.
I'm aware, but I just want everyone to realize this is people famously listen to this show for me,
right?
So I'm very well aware of it. They actually don't necessarily listen for my football opinions. They listen for my editing. They listen for...
They're really, the number of reviews that we get on iTunes, which I don't think we've received an iTunes review in like 2 years.
It's been a bit. It's a lot of Spotify reviews lately, actually. But
yeah, and the thing about Spotify, it seems like you can review individual episodes, which is kind of nuts. But
you can also see where people stop listening on Spotify. It's very... the inner numbers on that are kind of funny.
Amazing. But yeah, so the reviews we get obviously talk a great deal about how inspired they find themselves to be by James's editing.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, how could you not
especially when I mess up and leave in things. So if I may, so I've preached all year, and I think preached is the right word. I've preached all year that this Vikings team was different, and that we need to ignore this whole cursed thing. We need to ignore this whole this is the history of the team. We're waiting to fail sort of thing, in line with your piece. But I've spent, since the first Packers game, we were like, oh, there's some good stuff happening here. After the first Packers game, yes, this is a team you can believe in. This is a team that's built for the playoffs. This is a team that's going to go somewhere. And it flew in defiance of so many things that we have seen over the years, which is why I felt comfortable in saying that. This team was successful in one score games to the point where it was like a notable stat. They were winning games. They were coming back. You could trust Darnold in the fourth quarter. The defense would bend but not break. You'd have players flying all over the place. It looked like a great cast of characters, a truly likable team. Like a truly likable group.
One of the most likable teams I think I've seen in a long time. And obviously, I have liked a lot of the individual people on a lot of these Minnesota Vikings teams, but this was an extraordinarily charismatic team filled with people that I think a lot of us just regard as just like good people.
And
keep going.
No, to the point of like 2009 comes to mind. Like ignoring Favre now. Like,
well, also Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
And depending on your perspective, anyway, keep going.
But like all of these things, which is why I refuse to view this loss in the image of same old Vikings. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's upsetting me the most about what happened last night. Because either one of two things happened. Either the Lions broke Sam Darnold, which is entirely possible that this was pulled off, or the Vikings quit. Things got difficult, and this team that seemed to be built for adversity, that seemed to be built for the playoffs, the first 13 of the best team to ever only make the wild card round. And this is the result that they put up in... We were literally, like 2 weeks ago, ranked number 1 in the NFC for a brief period of time, but...
Right. Yeah.
And this is what we get. And I think that's what's maddening. Because I'm refusing to look at it as this was the team that, always does this. The Vikings always do this in the playoffs and everything. No. It's the fact that Kevin O'Connell could lead this team to the playoffs, but he couldn't make them win. And it sucks. My question to you, did Detroit break Sam Darnold?
I mean, it's a really hard question to answer because we only have a 1-game sample of post-Detroit Sam Darnold. And so it's tough to figure that out, but it certainly seems like it because the stuff that I wrote about Sam Darnold following the Detroit game, like the problems that we had kind of noticed with his level of play in that game versus kind of some of the other games prior to that, and then also the problems that we saw in the Rams game were pretty similar, right? Like he had new problems in the Lions game, a skittishness that we didn't see. We knew that he was kind of holding onto the ball too long throughout the balance of the season, but it felt like he was holding onto the ball much longer than necessary in both the Detroit and the Rams game. Like his eyes were slower or something. And it just seems like the level of his play, the specificity of the types of problems that he faced are so precise, right? That it seemed that we just had the same Sam Darnold for 2 games. Now, is that because of Detroit? I don't know. I don't know that Detroit necessarily broke him. I can't answer the question more completely. But I think that it's not the case, if I had to venture a guess, which is I think that Darnold was broken maybe by the Detroit Lions game, but not by the Detroit Lions, if that makes sense. I think that kind of the size, and again, I'm just guessing. I don't know what's in his head, but my guess is that the size of the game, right, the importance of that Lions game seemed to weigh heavy on him. He was playing way too excited to begin the game before the Lions could even do anything to really break him. Maybe it was the nervousness of finally playing a repeat opponent that he had lost to, which then happened the next week. Maybe that's the psychological element at play. Whatever it was, he was playing, it seemed like too excited. I don't really know kind of what was the motivating factor for why he was playing so poorly, but he was playing uniquely poorly, against Detroit. And then in the same way against the Rams. He didn't look like this in the first Rams game. He actually looked pretty good in the first Rams game.
Yeah, he looked like he was in control. And we said in our review after the Rams game, yeah, we probably would have lost even, but it would have been nice to see him get the face mask penalty and get a shot instead of the way that it had ended. But this was a completely different performance. And I took this in my head, and I would have said this on the show if I would have been, healthy enough to say it. Because I had the theory and this stupid thought that maybe the Lions game is a dress rehearsal for this. Maybe it was good that we had this big moment that he could play in, and if he lost, we were still in the playoffs. It was just a slightly harder road. But that he could get this experience. If it didn't work out, and Lord knows it didn't, that he could use this as a learning tool and play better in the wild card because he's been in a playoff atmosphere and probably could handle it better. And as it turns out, none of that happened. None of it matters. And the Vikings are not playing in Philadelphia this week.
Yeah. The only way the Vikings were to compete, of course, was if Darnold had made that turnaround. Now, the thing is, and I wrote in my piece, and I don't think that, with 24 hours of reflection on it, I don't think I'm going to change my mind on it. I think that that's a necessary condition for him to win. I think that if he was playing kind of near his best, the Vikings were probably not going to win. And I don't 100% know if that's the case, but the reason I'm saying that is because so many other elements failed, right? Now, there's going to be a question in the mailbag about kind of who's responsible for the sacks. I'll say primarily I think it was Sam Darnold, but the offensive line wasn't doing him very many favors. He was maximizing the damage of what a bad offensive line performance could do in this game, right? But also, I thought the play calling was really poor. We'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. Obviously, the defense tightened up in the second half. They gave up far fewer points and stuff like that. They forced punts, actually. But, the defense just wasn't playing well. And I imagine if the Vikings hadn't entered the second half with a 21-point deficit, and the Rams felt the need to do more than just drain the clock, that the defense would have had, more problems than they did. So I think they were kind of assisted in the second half showing by how poorly they played in the first half, right? So there's a lot of elements at play, but I don't think the rest of the team played well enough, nor was the coaching good enough for a good Sam Darnold performance to kind of pull out the stops and secure a win. So it's necessary, right? The Vikings would not have won or wouldn't win without a Sam Darnold turnaround, but I'm not confident that they would have won with a Sam Darnold turnaround either, which I think is one of the more frustrating things about this game, is that if it were one or two things that kind of faltered, you're like, well, that's football, that happens. It sucks. It wasn't our day, right? But everything fell apart in ways that I think individually, a lot of the cascading elements are predictable. The Vikings blitzed too much against a team that's actually pretty good against this style of blitzing. Okay, you could have seen that coming. Oh, the Vikings were a little bit too aggressive on downs they didn't need to be aggressive on. And you could see that going the other way. Okay. Oh, Sam Darnold was overthrowing receivers. Okay, you could have seen that coming. Oh, the receivers weren't doing as much as maybe they needed to kind of secure the ball in some of these catches. More problem in the Lions game than the Rams game, but still kind of a problem here. So, okay, you could see that coming. The offensive line wasn't holding up in the ways that we kind of expect them to. Oh, Brian O'Neill is up against a power rusher instead of a speed rusher, and he's a little bit weaker against that. So you can see that. It's all of these individual elements you can kind of see, but all of them kind of occurring at once, checking off all these boxes to produce this fundamental humiliation of the way the Vikings played. Plus, I mean, the refs were bad, and they were bad in ways that hurt both teams. So I don't want to say that the refs significantly changed elements, but the biggest bad call, in my opinion, also was the sack fumble turned into an incomplete pass, right?
Yeah.
And you add that onto the list of things, and it's man, I don't know if a good Sam Darnold performance really would have, if you're not getting that, I don't know. And the thing is, this sparked a huge debate online, but I was looking at all of the commentary from people who had played professional football before, people like, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. We saw that actually a little bit also from Bill Belichick on the Manning cast. We saw it from Brian Baldinger. We saw it from all of these former players. They hate the call. So I actually don't think that it's unreasonable for us to also hate the call. It feels like this is fundamentally in violation of what we think about the nature of that kind of call in football. So a lot of things were arrayed against the Vikings. And again, it's not like the Vikings didn't benefit from some crazy calls, right? I don't think it was unnecessary roughness when Bo Limmer blocked Andrew Van Ginkel while the play was still active. There was another call against the Rams that I thought was a stupid call. The refs were bad. I'm not saying that they uniquely hurt the Vikings, but it just feels like if you're generating big plays and they're getting taken away from you from reasons that are frankly difficult to understand, I don't know if a good Sam Darnold performance overcomes all of that.
It felt a bit. The Vikings feel a bit like what happened with the Steelers, where there was a brief period of time where they were it looked like the best team in the AFC, and shuffled out of the playoffs quickly. Is where where they're at and where we're at. They lost to a much better opponent, and God, this is going to be the show that really tests the iTunes rating. I'm really trying. Let's get into, before I start cursing in front of children. I assume children are listening. Don't.
Why would they listen?
This is not the recap show for you. Go find the second Packers victory recap. We were much happier then. Let's talk about the defense of the Rams and how they created that much pressure, because this was Sam Darnold getting swamped, and a lot of the time they weren't even sending that many people.
Yeah, no, this was a uniquely low blitz environment. I mean, the Rams are a very low blitzing team just kind of in general, but it felt like this game was, even for the Rams, a really uniquely low blitz environment. I know in the first half, they only sent blitzes on something like 7% of dropbacks. For the full game, according to PFF anyway, they only blitzed on 18% of dropbacks, and kind of a low end around the league is around 20%. So they were lower than kind of the lower end that you typically see. So an 18% blitz rate on these dropbacks, which makes sense. Sam Darnold was hitting 10 yards per attempt against the blitz this year, the best in the NFL. And he was outstanding against the blitz. A lot of that, I think, is because blitzes are often paired with man coverage, and I mean the Vikings were absolutely demolishing man coverage. But I think most of it was because there's fewer coverage players, and one more rusher is not helping you as much as one more coverage player. A problem that we saw on the other side of the field for the Vikings. But yeah, it wasn't as if though that Darnold played well when there wasn't a blitz. So we'll put a pin in that for a second. But the Rams mostly created pressure, not with a ton of stunts and twists, which they did do, but just straight up beat your guy rushing, right? Which we don't actually see a lot of. In fact, a lot of historical, over the past 10 years, a lot of defenses have been criticized for implementing game plans similar to what the Rams did here, where it didn't necessarily involve that many games or stunts or twists up front. So a lot of non-blitzed downs had a rusher just beat, and sometimes it was like a really surprising instance, like when Jared Verse, a rookie who admittedly ranks like third or fourth in the league among edge rushers in total pressures this year. So you don't want to be like, it's just a rookie, but still, Brian O'Neill is a veteran. He's in consideration to be kind of a top 5 right tackle. I think he's fallen off a little bit, so he's not exactly a top 5 right tackle, but a very, very good one. And right now, the best healthy offensive lineman for the Vikings. When he got beat as consistently as he did, that's a pretty bad sign. We saw a ton of mistakes from Dalton Reisner. We saw a ton of mistakes from David Quessenberry. We saw, that I guess not a huge surprise. We saw a fair amount of mistakes from Blake Brandel. It just was bad. I don't know, those 3 players probably gave up the most pressures, but I saw Dalton Reisner get beat a fair amount. I saw Garrett Bradbury struggle a little bit. Obviously Cam Robinson, when he was in, struggled a little bit. I think that he gave up probably the most pressures. So he was up against either Michael Hogt, who I often forget is on the Rams, and I think a lot of people wouldn't be shocked by that. But sometimes he's beaten by, because Jared Verse lined up over the right side, a good chunk of the time. But we saw Keir Thomas, we saw Byron Young. Byron Young did tons of damage. Cam Robinson had just a brutally bad game. But the combination at right tackle with David Quessenberry and Brian O'Neill, that was bad, because Brian O'Neill did get hurt partway through the game. And the interior wasn't the biggest problem, but they weren't doing super well. I think Garrett Bradbury might have had the best pass blocking game out of all these guys, which is deranged. I don't know. I don't know what else to put.
That shouldn't ever be a thing, quite frankly.
Yeah. So I don't love all of that. No, he didn't get a ton of one-on-ones because, again, the Rams don't blitz that much. They didn't do that many stunts and twists. So he had a lot of double team, opportunities. So he didn't really have to hurt himself that much as a single pass rusher, but it's just, that's a bad situation to be in, right? The Vikings didn't have Christian Darrisaw. They haven't had him for half the season, and that created its own problems. That by itself is somewhat overcomable. But when Brian O'Neill is not holding up, when Dalton Reisner is not holding up, there's just nothing you can do. There are instances where the Rams did send extra pressure. On those instances, it felt like Sam Darnold had no idea what was going on. I think he got taken down on blitzes. So they only sent blitzes on 18% of dropbacks, but 2 of his 9 sacks came on blitzes, right? So 22%. It's a little bit higher than the blitz rate. And they were just unblocked, and he would just hold on to the ball. So sometimes they created a bunch of pressure because, not just because the offensive lineman got beat, because Darnold was holding onto the ball so long. On pressures, his average time to hold on to the ball was actually not as long as it was in the Lions game, but it felt longer because it felt like receivers are getting out into their patterns. It was 3.44 seconds on those dropbacks, which in the Lions game, it was obscene. It was something like 4 seconds. But he was under pressure on over 50% of his dropbacks, and a lot of that was his fault. So the answer to how do they create that much pressure? They they beat a bunch of guys individually in specific ways that are kind of uniquely problems for them. For example, for Brian O'Neill, it is power. For Cam Robinson, I think it's the ability to go to the inside of him. For Dalton Reisner, sometimes it's quickness. So like being able to exploit those specific weaknesses of those offensive linemen helps. Sam Darnold holding onto the ball forever helps. Not much you can do.
Yeah. Which, when he wasn't getting sacked, which admittedly happened often, almost a record-breaking a number of times.
Yeah, tied the single game sack record for a playoff game, right? Like 9 sacks, the tied for the most in a playoff game.
Yeah. So there's that.
Good. Great.
There were a couple of records that I was kind of paying attention to this weekend. One was the sack record because Darnold was getting carved up like a roast. But we had a couple of quarterbacks attempt to go full Delhomme. And I was enjoying that thoroughly. That was fun. The Jared,
both Herbert and Love, right?
Yeah. Yep. At first, Herbert really looked like he was going to go full Delhomme, and when you go full Delhomme, you don't recover. So
I mean, like that's the story of Delhomme.
Yeah, that is the story of Delhomme. He went full Delhomme. He threw 5 picks and a pick 6. And we got 4 picks and a pick 6 from Herbert, and then Jordan Love looked
Which, by the way, for Justin Herbert is more picks than he threw in the prior 17 games.
Yeah, it was amazing.
4 picks in the game, 3 picks all season. I don't think I've ever seen that in my life.
That was a meltdown to end all meltdowns. But he almost went full Delhomme. And Jordan Love was like, "Hold my beer. I want to try at this. I want to try at this too." So it was close. It was real close. One of Jordan Love's worst games, and I think I've said that a couple of times this year. But we are talking about the Vikings-Rams game, and so when Darnold wasn't getting sacked, he was overthrowing receivers. He was putting the ball in the wrong spot, say behind receivers, or just missing screen passes.
He missed at least 2 screen passes, right? Like he missed at least 2, including at the very beginning of the third quarter, right? Because at the beginning of the third quarter, you're thinking, all right, the Vikings need to reset. They have scored, 20 more points than their opponent in a single half before, so they need to get there. Obviously, that's very difficult. But, reset, score on the opening drive, take it snap by snap, whatever, right? The things coaches say, it's possible. We've seen the Vikings do literally unprecedented things in the second half, right? I mean, that was the whole deal 2 years ago, right? They can do it, sure. And the very first play, I think I called it a double screen on Twitter. I don't know if it is a double screen because it was a motion and then also a screen, but either way, it was a fake to behind the line of scrimmage pass to then throw on the other side of the ball behind the line of scrimmage pass. So essentially a double screen. And he missed it. And then I think 2 drives later, there's another screen. He misses it both to Aaron Jones. Like, come on, what are you doing? You're missing screens. So when he was in a clean pocket, he threw, okay, I'm going to look up the league-wide rate, but I know he threw 5.7 yards per attempt, which is awful, and a 65% completion percentage, which in a clean pocket is actually not great, especially when it's very obvious that the reason that you're throwing in a clean pocket is because you're getting rid of the ball quickly, which means that you're throwing the ball shorter, which means that your completion percentage should be higher. The league-wide average completion percentage in a clean pocket, let me reduce this to just 20%, is 73%, right? So he was at 65%, and he wasn't even doing that much on those completions. And the thing is, that actually does not really speak a ton to his accuracy, because a lot of these completed passes, I'm thinking of the first third down they converted, which occurred with 2 minutes left in the first quarter, which, okay, was the high Jordan Addison pass. And it's like, well, that's a great catch, man. And you don't realize at that moment when Addison catches that ball that is like over and behind him, that he is going to be asked to do that all day. And he is a pretty good receiver. But he cannot do that all day and expect to catch a good chunk of those passes. He makes a ton of great plays in this game, and he can't recover from all of the awful throws that Darnold is sending his way. Same thing happened to TJ Hawkinson. We saw a pretty bad overthrow. We saw obviously some bad throws to Justin Jefferson, including, late in the game. Everyone stops caring at this point anyway, but it's just a throw into double coverage that should have been a pick. And I think they throw into double coverage, he was getting pressured on, but like his best throw actually, so his worst throw and his best throw both occurred when his hand was hit. The worst throw was the pick, right? Just an out that was never going to get outside the receiver. He was well covered, and it just falls short, and so the defender picks it up, and but Kobe Durant, right? But also like his best throw was he was getting nailed and it got hit as he was thrown. It was like a perfect dime, and it was like the only dime he had. Just awful in a clean pocket. I don't know. When you're pressured over 40% of the time, you very rarely win. That like seems to be kind of the tipping point for win-loss, unless the other quarterback's also getting pressured at like 40%. And so, he was getting pressured at 55% or so, a lot of it his fault, as we discussed. But when you can't perform in a clean pocket, right? When you are averaging under 6 yards per attempt in a clean pocket, which again, the NFL average in a clean pocket, the yards per attempt is something like 8, maybe 7.5. Okay, I just looked it up. It's 7.8, so I was in between. When you can't do that, when you can't beat 6, okay, so there are 43 quarterbacks who have thrown at least looks like 50 passes from a clean pocket this year. 43 quarterbacks. In yards per attempt for this game, Darnold ranked 40th.
Ouch.
Yeah, he's just missing throws. He's throwing off his base. He's throwing high. He's throwing off of his rhythm. So he's not throwing like where the receivers are kind of breaking them. So he's not anticipating these throws. So he's not going to where the receiver is going to be. He's throwing behind them sometimes. He's throwing over them at other times. He was just spraying the ball, and he just couldn't hit anybody. So you can say he's the primary reason the Vikings lost, and I think you'd be right. But again, per the previous discussion, if he had played excellent football, I don't think the Vikings would have won.
So let's just, before we move on to the defense, the fact that the Vikings had just fully given up. If you throw 5 picks in the fourth quarter trying to come back, I get it. You know what I don't get? It's late in the third or beginning of the fourth, or even middle of the fourth, and you're running the ball.
Yeah, let's take a look at the third and fourth quarter statistics for running the ball real quick.
I mean, I'm good. I'm good with the idea of getting an explosive play or two out of Cam Akers. Maybe finding a way for Aaron Jones to get like 7 or 8 yards because they're not expecting a run, because why would you run down 3 scores? But
yeah, I mean, Joe Buck, of all people, Joe Buck said it best. The Vikings, I assume, are aware that they're down 18 points.
Yeah,
you nailed it, my guy. I don't know what to tell you. You're correct. The Vikings should have been a little bit more aware of the fact that they were down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter when they start handing the ball off to Cam Akers and Aaron Jones.
If you're gonna play like if you're gonna play like you have Blake Bortles at center, great. Have them throw Blake Bortles overthrows at that point. Just throw deep. I don't care. Let's Rex Grossman it out. Just throw deep. I don't care. Unleash the dragon. I will never trust a ginger quarterback again. Why?
So the Vikings ran the ball. The Vikings ran the ball in the third and fourth quarter at about a 24-25% clip. So a quarter of their plays were runs. You compare that to the average NFL game, which is just like over the course of an average NFL game, you're at about 35%. So it was less, but it was way more than you'd expect a team down by 3 scores. Like the run should be contextual, like on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, which of course, when the Vikings did get to 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, they threw the ball. So it was just like an astounding, like on 1st and 10. And the thing is, the Vikings were a throwing team. This was the primary criticism of them from the Lions game, is that when they got into the red zone, they weren't running the ball. But that doesn't mean that in the next game, when you're down by 3 scores and you're at midfield on 1st and 10, you should be running the ball. These are different types of criticisms of the way that you're engaging this mixture of play calling.
Yeah, it turns out bad idea.
Just a plainly bad idea. And this doesn't, by the way, include the Sam Darnold scrambles, which obviously those aren't designed runs. Otherwise, they're closer at 30%. But yeah, I don't really understand what the logic was there. It's not like they were successful when they were running the ball in the 3rd and 4th quarter. Aaron Jones averaged 3 yards an attempt in the 3rd quarter and 3 yards an attempt in the 2nd quarter. In the 4th quarter, Cam Akers averaged 4.5 yards an attempt. So the Vikings running backs combined for about 3.3 yards per attempt in the second half. So the runs weren't successful. They didn't occur on 3rd or 4th and short. And they drained the clock when the Vikings needed as many possessions as they could possibly use to win. And I get like starting the game like at the top of the 3rd quarter, so starting the half with a little bit more of a mix of run and pass, because you're not in that dire of territory yet because there's about 6 possessions left in the game. But when you're kind of out of that first possession, now you have to start kind of quickening the game and buying some of those possessions. And you're not really doing that with like these screens, these short passes, and these runs. I don't really understand it. It doesn't make a ton of sense. The Vikings were not running in contextually appropriate situations. They were running in situations that were just like, you got to be throwing the ball. You got to quicken up the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't love it.
It was a bad look. It was a very, very bad look. Let's get to the defense, because when they started the game, I even want to say I'll give them credit. After the first 2 drives, you looked at it and went, "Oh, they're trying to do exactly what they did in the first Rams game and what they attempted to do during the Lions game, the second one, and it didn't work here either."
Yeah. So I mean, they love blitzing, right? They love blitzing with zone coverage behind it. Although they've been doing a lot more man coverage recently. And they blitzed the Lions a ton in this game. By the end of the first half, they've been blitzing Matthew Stafford at about a 70% clip. They finished the game with a blitz rate of about 60%. So obviously they held back in the second half, which they were a better defense in the second half. Yeah, the thing is, Stafford was under pressure a decent amount. He was under pressure 38% of the time. That's a pretty good amount, right? Right next to that kind of turning point that I mentioned, the 40% kind of inflection point in player performance. And he averaged about as much under pressure as he did without pressure. Now, I don't think that that's sustainable. We saw a couple of like really astounding, almost lucky throws that occurred under pressure that I think over kind of a longer period of time, those won't repeat or wouldn't repeat. They happen to be pretty good in that game. A lot of them happen to be to the tight end, Tyler Higbee, who was injured halfway through the game, ended up going to the hospital or something. But
went back home with the Rams to LA. That was what was reported today, is that he did make it with the team, but like a chest contusion ?
Yeah, I'm not entirely. Yeah, I mean, it was a chest injury. It looked like it was a chest contusion based off the reports that we got. Yeah, I'll reserve my thoughts on Tyler Higbee. We've talked about him before.
Yeah,
but a good kind of way to kind of look at the splits for how the Vikings performed against Matthew Stafford is that when he was blitzed, he was throwing at 9.8 yards per attempt. And I remember I said that Sam Darnold led the league this year in performance against the blitz at 10.0 yards per attempt, which was the best in the NFL. This is 9.8, right? So he was gangbusters against the blitz against the Vikings. When the Vikings didn't blitz, which is about 40% of dropbacks, he was only averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. Makes you think, right? I mean, he was throwing short when he was not blitzed, and when he was blitzed, he was throwing deep, right? His average depth of target when blitzed was 11.6, and when he was not blitzed, it was 3.0, right? Like, it was obviously a lot of these non-blitzes are screens and stuff like that, maybe they wouldn't count as blitzes because they got rid of the ball so quickly. But I think that a lot of it was just he understood the coverage shell that the Vikings were in, understood that there were not going to be many deep opportunities, and so he dumped the ball off on those non-blitz plays because he was still holding onto the ball on non-blitz plays. He actually held onto the ball longer on non-blitz plays than he did on generally pressured plays, 2.52 seconds. So it was a survey of what was happening across the field, understanding he wasn't going to get anything deep, and then throwing it short. So the Vikings somehow did not continue, or I mean, they adjusted a little bit in the second half, but did not understand after their game against the Rams, weeks ago. Did not understand that, maybe they got to dial back the blitz a little bit. And I've made excuses, I think, for the Vikings defense all year, and I was happy to make them because ultimately they were a good unit. About them blitzing against teams that are generally good against the blitz. Like I've said, sometimes you just got to do it that way because that's the identity of your defense. It's the thing that your players have been taught how to do. They're not going to live in their comfort zone and play their best football if they're not doing the stuff that they're trained to do. But also all of your non-blitz stuff is leveraged off of your blitz stuff. So to make the non-blitzes look good, you have to blitz a fair amount. I've said all of that, and I believe all of that. But I think in this particular game, and I've said that about, games where it felt like maybe they should have adjusted their matchup and blitzed less, and they continued to blitz, and I've said that was fine. This is not a game where I think that's the case. I think that they should have made those adjustments quickly because the way that the Rams were dissecting the Vikings blitz is very apparent that they knew kind of where the holes that were being left by the extra pass rushers were being created by the blitz and would always throw into it every single time. And if your blitzes are found out that early in the game, you do have to dial it back a lot more than by the end of the half. So I don't know what was happening. He was averaging under 5 yards per attempt when the Vikings weren't blitzing him. There are a couple of circumstances here. It primarily occurred in the second half where the clock was more important than yards and Tyler Higbee was out and all that. So it does distort the statistics a little bit. But just generally speaking, it didn't make any sense to try and blitz at a 60% clip like they have for the past 4 or 5 games. Mm-hmm. They really, really should have, played a much more. And I know that that's outside of the DNA of Brian Flores, and you kind of want to ride the defense that got you there. But at some point, you do have to kind of adjust and be a little bit more adaptable than you are.
Well, Flores had even said that, look, we were told 4 hours before the game started last time that their receivers were going to be playing. And we were a bit scrambling after that. You knew who was playing this game. You knew what to expect. You knew what happened from the last game, and you came at it with the same thing.
Yeah. From the first drive, you knew that it wasn't going to work. Right. I think the first 2-3 drives, the Vikings blitzed on all but one Stafford dropback. And they scored 2 touchdowns off of those drives. Stafford was something like 10 for 10 against the blitz. And again, from that moment, they did technically dial it down from a 90% blitz rate to 70 by the end of the half and 60 by the end of the game. But they didn't dial it down enough. We saw him still take advantage of a number of these blitzes. And like you said, they understood the score. They understood exactly how they were going to get carved up by running these same packages because that's how it worked, weeks ago. But this time with the capacity to prepare for the fact that Puka Nacua was playing in this game.
So we can talk about that. I don't know that. Look, the Rams offense came out there and just dominated. They spread the ball around. They didn't even utilize Cooper Kupp until the fourth quarter. They were just able to move the ball and get it down the field.
Yeah. I think some of that was because the Vikings were pretty conscious about doubling Puka, which is actually one of the defensive decisions I didn't mind that they made. And so the Rams, part of the reason that they go to Cooper is because Tyler Higbee is out for the second half. The other reason they go to Cooper, I think, is because the Vikings are a little bit more conscious about doubling Puka after that first drive, which, like, good timing on that, guys. But yeah, I think that Cup was kind of, I'm not going to say an afterthought, but kind of more of an outlet for them. But by then it was a little bit too little too late. Again, the Vikings defense was better in the second half, even after you account for kind of all of the changes that the Rams make. They don't score a touchdown in the second half. They score a field goal on the opening drive, or their first drive of the second half. But they were still able to, because like at the first drive, the field goal drive, they took 6 minutes off the clock, and then the first drive they have in the fourth quarter, which starts with 12 minutes left, they take 4.5 minutes off the clock. The other drives obviously don't last very long. The last drive is only 45 seconds because it's just a kill the clock scenario. But so in that sense, the defense was much better in the second half, and so kind of allowing them to funnel things to Cooper Kupp was fine. But it felt like they needed to be more than fine, right? They needed that touchdown that was taken away from them, but they also, once it's taken away, you got to do it. You got to do it again. You got to score. They did get the ball back pretty quickly after that, but
they did.
Yeah,
the crowd was pumped. The crowd was booing like crazy, and they got the ball back, which felt great. They didn't do anything with it, but they got the ball back.
Yeah, they got the ball back. It's nice. Great cardio, guys.
I know we briefly touched on it, but that penalty, that fumble that wasn't. At some point, do we need to have a conversation about the spirit of the rule when it comes to intentional grounding, and have the same rule applied to it, or the same thing applied to it that is applied to pass interference? Where is it a catchable ball? Do we need to do something like that, where his head is pointed down to the earth? The receiver the ball is being thrown to, it literally has his back to him. And that counted somehow as a forward pass, not as intentional grounding.
So prior to that, it should be worth noting that the official, or the officiating consultant that they brought in, which was Dean Blandino for this game, said, or was it Terry McCauley? I don't remember. Said that you cannot add intentional grounding as a penalty to like a replay assist or something like that. So that's one thing. The second thing, of course, is that a lot of people think that it wouldn't be intentional grounding. So first of all, it very much seems like every player that's played that has commentated on this broadly disagrees that it should even be a pass. But the primary objection that people seem to have, and there's a couple of people in my mentions who don't have this as their primary objection, but the majority of people who think that this should not be intentional grounding are really going at it from a kind of shrug your shoulders. Well, what can you do? What can you do? The ball moved forward, and it was in the vicinity of a receiver, an eligible receiver. So I don't know how you can't call that. I don't know how you can write a rule that doesn't call that, not intentional grounding, right? But I think that you're right, James, that like, well, first of all, a lot of people are like really caught up on like, you cannot write rules that carry with them intent, right? But first of all, intent is literally in the name of the rule. At some point, you are attempting to divine what the quarterback is trying to do. Like, at some point, you are figuring out intent. That's what unnecessary roughness is, that it often attempts to get into intent. That's what pass interference is sometimes. It often gets into intent. That's what taunting is. It gets into intent. You have to infer intent from actions that you can look at on the field, but at the end of the day, they're always making subjective calls, and people are really obsessed with the idea of writing rules in such a way that if you litigate them again and again and again, you can come to a line in the sand where you know that this is one thing or another based off of the text of the rule. And I think this obsession with it really kills a lot of moments in big games that don't really make a lot of sense. And that's why we had like a did Dez catch it kind of situation. I think we're at
10-year anniversary. 10-year
10-year anniversary, by the way. 10-year anniversary. Which, by the way, I think we're much better about catches than we were 5-6 years ago, where what is a catch was like a huge meme. I don't think that that's really the case anymore. And I think some of it was that, I mean, they did kind of continue to litigate it and become more precise. But I think what really happened was we just kind of understood that you just kind of have to understand that catches are catches and not catches are not catches. And then going into all of this detail, defining it is not really going to help us because there's always going to be weird edge cases that people are going to be mad about. And rightly so, because our intuition is always going to be a lot more nuanced, even though it can't explain its nuance, than the specificity of these rules. And when we get so focused on the specific technical wording of all of these rules, you end up in situations like the one where we saw where it's just a bullshit play. There's no way around it. It's just bullshit. Like, and Bill Belichick, when he was like, they're going to call this a pass, right? They're going to call this an incomplete pass.
Because this is an offensive league.
Yeah, he just said it's an offensive league. Yeah, and he kind of implied that because it was a call from New York that it had to, but like, yeah, it's an offensive league. That's what it is. And that sucks. It sucks, and I hate it. And I understand there are maybe the way that you write the rule that has to be a pass, but like the obsession about being able to point to judgment and precedent and text in a rule book when we know it's still at the end of the day subjective is really hurting kind of these big moments in games for football. And again, I don't think the Vikings would have won if they had gotten that. Obviously, you know, this would have put the Vikings in a much different clock situation, and maybe they would have rallied to come back. But just like with the other Rams game with the face mask, right? They deserved a chance, right? One. But two, like, I think the refs screwed up in other ways that advantaged the Vikings. So this is not me saying that the refs... also, I mean, they should have called the false start and Puka Nacua on fourth down, but whatever. Yeah. This is not me saying
we can easily argue that it probably wasn't roughing the kicker, roughing the punter.
Right? No, exactly. Yeah, that's the other one.
Probably
I don't
not,
think that was.
But
right. But like, it was an inexcusably bad game from the refs. It just was, and it hurts the product and it hurts our enjoyment. And you know, it's not as if the Vikings were in a spot where the refs would have mattered that much. And even if they were, the refs, you know, helped the Vikings, maybe not as much as they hurt them, but they helped the Vikings in stupid, unnecessary ways. And the Vikings couldn't take advantage of those anyway. So it just sucks seeing that stuff, right? I would have loved for Andrew Van Ginkel to have another defensive score. Just to add another one, even if it's technically because postseason stats don't really count for regular season, whatever. That ruled. That was awesome. It would have been nice to see. And I hate the general concept that pansy ass play. I don't know how else to put it.
Wasn't that Grenard? I think it was Grenard that had picked it up and tried to bring it in. Because my first thought was, and I think I even screamed out of the TV, Andrew Van Grenard. Okay, hey, Grenard.
I'm just so used to it being Andrew Van Ginkel at this point.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, it makes football worse if that's a pass, is the only way I can put it.
Yeah. It's, I think that's right. It made football worse. And I'm not wanting to be in a situation where we have to decide, like, intent on everything, but if it would take serious, even like the most hardened Madden players would look at that and go, well, he's not going to catch it through his body. Like,
right. Like if the name of the violation is intentional grounding, it is very clear what he was intending to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like it doesn't get more basic than that. He was looking at his own feet. And as the ball was getting jostled out of his hand, he just pushes it. It's not a throwing motion. It wasn't even like a submarine pitch.
No.
Right? Like in baseball. It wasn't even that.
It wasn't even a Ben DiNucci sidearm.
Right. Which we've seen Stafford throw sidearms. They don't look like that. Someone was like, well, it looks a lot like a shovel pass. No, it doesn't.
No, it does not. You are wrong, sir.
The ball was getting pushed, and he continued its progress with his fingers, right? Like that's... F you, dude.
Just if you're trying to get the ball away and your head is pointed to the ground and the receiver that is in the area of the throw is
looking the other
looking the other way, there's only two players who would catch that ball this year. Like behind the back, one is Justin Jefferson, and the other, just for sheer memeability, and to make the Giants feel bad, would be Saquon Barkley. Those are the two people who would catch that ball this year. Neither of them were on the Rams offense that game.
Just insane.
So, the Vikings lost.
Yeah.
The Vikings are done.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this leave the Vikings as far as the offseason is concerned? And we don't even need to go into the Darnold thing, because we'll go into that in the mailbag. We've already analyzed it a million times. Ignoring the Darnold mess, where does this leave the Vikings moving forward?
So the Vikings are going to have to be a free agency team. So they only have they've got 4 picks in the draft, right? Because there's another trade or something like that. I don't know. Oh no, it was they're probably going to get a compensatory, or it's been announced that they got a compensatory, something along those lines. So the Vikings have 4 picks in the draft, not very many. They don't have any draft resources. They pick late in the first. They don't pick in the second. They pick late in the third. So they've got a ton of cap space in free agency, so they're going to have to be a little bit of a free agency team. But I think kind of globally, we have to think about the Vikings in terms of obviously how they're going to handle the quarterback position, but entering the playoffs, I believe from a snap-weighted perspective, they were the oldest team in the league. Still in the playoffs anyway. Or maybe just in the league, That's not a great place to be, right? The Packers love to point out that they're the youngest. Great, good for them. But the Vikings will have to find some ways to acquire young talent. A lot of that's going to have to come in free agency, some 25, 26-year-olds. I don't know who's entering free agency yet. We'll take a look at that later. But they need to get younger on offense and on defense. On defense, it's specifically, at the safety position, right, with Harrison Smith potentially leaving. I don't know if you saw the Don Mitchell interview that she posted late last night, and now I retweeted it, I think, earlier today.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that hits me right in the heart.
And good on her for letting it breathe, for not interrupting, for sure. Just letting it, because there's an art to that sort of thing where you let the person you're interviewing just go. You don't interrupt them, especially when they're showing a little bit of emotion, whatever that you're not used to getting out of him. Just let it breathe.
Yeah, and he gave a great, really emotional answer about kind of what it meant to play football this year. He could still be coming back. I don't know, right? He talked about how, in his 15 years of football, this is one of the most fun seasons he's ever played. He really likes playing for Brian Flores. He really loves, the personality of the team, which, again, like you said, James, most likable team, right? So we'll see, but you have to make a plan for that. You have to figure out kind of what's going to happen to the defensive interior. You're probably fine at linebacker, but you really need some plans at cornerback, because Shaq Griffin, Stephon Gilmore, that cannot be your core heading forward. So the Vikings, I think, are in a lurch, right? They're once again in a spot where they have to make significant investments in their defense. They'll probably do it with Brian Flores. It does not look like he is a serious candidate for any of the 3 teams that have contacted him. I think he's only done 1 interview so far. I think it's the Jaguars. But 2 other teams have expressed an interest in wanting to interview him, I guess. We'll see. But he does not look like he is a primary candidate for any of these teams. So you'll probably have him back. If not, it's probably Durante Jones. But yeah, I mean, the defense is kind of it's a repeat of last year where they had a really strong performance, except at the end of the season. The Lions participating in kind of demolishing the defense twice now. But you kind of don't know. You don't know how sustainable this unique style of defense is. You don't know if they're going to have the horses to run kind of a full-fledged defense again of this version next year. That's going to be the biggest question. Offensively, the Vikings will have to figure out the interior offensive line. They cannot roll with whatever's happening at right guard for sure, and they probably can't roll with whatever's happening at left guard. And they probably should move on at center, right? But that's probably, I think, the least of those 3 priorities. So I don't know. not a rebuilding year for the Vikings. They're just coming off of a 14-win season, but they're probably not bringing their quarterback back. And they've got a bunch. Again, oldest team in the league. They've got a bunch of players that are going to turn over. So I don't know. It's another year where it's going to feel weird to say that you've got kind of lower expectations for the team, but I think you've got lower expectations for the team. I hate it.
And it's not just that we've got a few people that'll be free agents. Oh no.
I think they have the most.
They have the most. If this all leads to Jerry Jones hiring Brian Flores, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but it would be very entertaining from a well, I guess the owners club doesn't matter anymore sort of thing. Like it'd be fun to see that be the role that he has.
I mean, like he's competing with like Deion Sanders and maybe not Bill Belichick. So
just the idea that he could put at like of the moment that it broke on Twitter before it hit the halftime shows or before it hit the halftime show that Deion was talking about doing it, or at least he had a conversation with Jerry Jones about it. And my only thought was, no, that's probably not it. But Mike McCarthy leaving and going to Chicago is independently hilarious. But if it ends up meaning that Brian Flores somehow, despite his lawsuit, goes down and ends up being the coach of the Cowboys, that's great. That is very funny to me.
Extremely funny. So I'm looking at this list of free agents, and it is, obviously technically the starting left tackle, Cam Robinson, the Vikings are not going to bring him back because they have a true starting left tackle, but it's a starting quarterback. There are 2 starting safeties, not Josh Metellus. There are 2 starting safeties. There are 3 starting cornerbacks. They're running back 1 and the running back 2. They're starting left guard, tight end 3, the best tight end 3 in the league, of course.
Obviously.
So starting left guard, quarterbacks 1, 2, and 4. And safety 4. Edge 3, although he wouldn't have been edge 3 next year, would have been Dallas Turner. Edge 3, and then edge 5, Jihad Ward. And then defensive, like non-nose tackle, defensive tackle 1, maybe, and Jonathan Bullard. It's a lot of players. All 3 cornerbacks, 1, 2 running back, 1, 2, 4 quarterback, 4 receiver, 5 receiver, 3, 5 edge, 4 safety. It's the punter.
Yeah, when it lists the punter, it's everybody. By the way, do we need this? Somebody had submitted this as a mailbag question when we didn't record a mailbag. Are we in a situation where we need to talk about GOAT status for our long snapper, for our 3-time Pro Bowler long snapper?
No.
I don't know.
Come on,
that's 3 Pro Bowls. That's
I mean, I did talk about the 2 greatest long snappers ever on our previous show. So,
well,
I don't think he's there. Is he innovating the long snapping position?
He might be, based on
based on 3 Pro Bowls.
Look, the San Francisco's fullback keeps getting in over CJ Ham. I'm grasping at straws here. Okay, I'm coping the only way that I can, which is trying to make a mountain out of a molehill position. Let's go to the mailbag. This is a substantial mailbag. It's mostly game and season related. However, it does veer off, and I will warn you when that happens for those who are new to the show. Raul asks, what is your favorite Sam Darnold memory from this unexpectedly awesome season? Mine is the bomb to Jefferson against Houston. Thanks for the great coverage this season.
So for me, the NFL about 19 hours before we started recording posted a Sam Darnold highlight film. It is longer than I thought, and this is not a knock on Sam Darnold having a bunch of highlights this year. He had a bunch of highlights, but they just include a lot of plays that I wouldn't have included in a highlight reel. They're really good plays, but it's just long. But for me, it's the whole San Francisco game. which kind of mirrors the 2009 season, right? Where it's like, oh my God, the San Francisco game is when I started to believe. I don't know if this was the game I started to believe in Sam Darnold, but it was like every element that made Sam Darnold awesome this year was present in this game. He was spinning out of sacks. He was rushing for first downs. I think he had 4 rushing plays in that game for first downs, if I remember correctly. He hit Jefferson for the 97-yard bomb. He later hit Jalen Naylor for a touchdown. He had some of the best tight window throws this season just coming in that game. This was an opponent that at the time, we really respected a lot. They didn't have Christian McCaffrey, but the rest of the injuries would come on to hit them later. The Vikings really kind of announced themselves as a team to pay attention to, which they made good on the next 3 games in that game. It was really awesome. I mean, there's a couple of other awesome moments. I really love the Green Bay game, and I love the second Green Bay game even more.
Comeback against the Jets was good.
The comeback against the Jets was awesome. The Houston game was kind of funny because it was like you had all of the bad moments of Sam Darnold that were not punished and all the good moments of Sam Darnold that were realized, because that red zone sequence was stupid, but you end up with like a touchdown. But to me, it's the San Francisco game. That was awesome. For an off-field moment, I think it's after the Packers game, the water bottle stuff. That was so cool, man. That was so cool.
It was. And that was the last win.
And that also was the last win.
Why not? Raul also asks, the more I think about it, shouldn't we reassess the value of doinks? It's actually harder to hit the uprights and crossbar, so shouldn't doinks be worth at least 4 points? I
think
there have been some really great moments this weekend as far as doinks were concerned, including the doink in.
The doink in was crazy.
The statue of Doinkerty, like it was, the Washington doincument or whatever. Yeah, I loved it. I loved it so much. That was fantastic. And the fact that he was clearly like struggling with his OCD on the way to kick was the other thing on that. Like, go you, dude. That's impressive. And it doinks in. And that drove him nuts. That just like nails under his or like actual like nails under his fingernail. Like just that just killed him to do that.
Yeah. That was awesome. Shouts to OCD, by the way. No, that was great. I think doinks that go in should be worth more. That's harder.
Yes.
Doinks that go out obviously shouldn't count unless horseshoe around double doink.
If you double doink,
that should be
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be points. That doesn't mean we should retroactively give Chicago the points for the double doink,
or the London game against the Vikings where they double doinked and lost the Saints.
That was outstanding. But going forward, you should get 2 points for a double doink, and if you manage the rare triple doink, you should get 6.
I'm good with that, actually. I'm good with that. If you doink and go in, that should be 4.
Right. You doink and go in, that should be 4. You doink and go out, that's the same. That's nothing. You double doink, you get 2. You triple doink, you get 6.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
all right.
What else? Yeah, let's end the mailbag there. I feel like we really accomplished something today. We've helped decide what intentional grounding should be, and we've helped decide how to make kickers more relevant.
Mm-hmm. Which we always strive to do.
Oh yeah, the Hell League exists for this reason. Let's go to KP, who asks, previous playoff failures have all been classified as either a rug pull or gut punch, or a complete no-show. With these underlying metrics and quality of work over this season, these last 2 games somehow accomplish both. What new way will the Vikings disappoint us next time?
I think we left a lot of meat on the bone for this one. We did not resolve the Will Reichard storyline, which, we could create a storyline for next year based off of that. So, that's not necessarily a wasted storyline, but I think, there was a lot of potential here. I thought it was actually, and this will answer some of the other mailbag questions about the way that these stories were constructed. I thought it was kind of old hat to go to the Seeing Ghosts storyline that was previewed several seasons ago for Sam Darnold. It was queued up a little bit by, oh crap, I forgot his name, Bubba, who invented the Sam Darnold out for mono video creator. where you can input your own and you get like a generator for Sam Darnold while he's out. So it kind of previewed that we would be getting another Seeing Ghosts game, but I thought it was kind of boring. We actually revisited Seeing Ghosts last week, so I didn't think that was very good from a story beat perspective. But yeah, I think there's that. Obviously, I think getting a close game storyline in conjunction with the Will Reichert storyline would have been good here, especially if Will Reichert had the opportunity to nail more kicks and then only to miss the last one, a la Blair Walsh 2015. I think that would have been good from like a kill the Vikings perspective or kill the fan base perspective. I know kickers also feel like old hat, but we didn't really get a kicker storyline to the same degree. Like I don't think a missed kick was ever a reason the Vikings lost this season. So harkening back to some of the old kicker issues, I think that's a fine callback in a way that the Seeing Ghost stuff really wasn't. I don't know how else to explain it. I think we did see a little bit of the Cam Robinson, like kind of you put that red flag there halfway through the season and then it comes up in the season finale. That one's fine. But it just felt like you don't want to check out halfway through an episode, right? Like I feel like the season finale lacked a lot of punch. And obviously a lot of times the best episode in a season is the second to last episode. And the Lions game kind of felt a little bit more... It had like a little bit more juice, both in terms of the hype leading up to it and kind of the gameplay itself. But I didn't like seeing a repeat of some of those story beats from the previous episode. So I think that there were a lot of ways that they could have done more here. I think it's fine to do the Brian Flores, oh my God, it all fell apart again stuff. I think that was kind of signposted well. But I think like another Stephon Gilmore pass interference game, that would have been like a great way to do it. I think distributing the ref error among both teams so that both teams feel grievance, that wasn't that great. That was messy. I don't think it resolved very well. I think a face mask penalty, a missed face mask penalty or a called face mask penalty to turn the tide of the game, either way, I think that would have been huge, right? Because you already have the Rams storyline for the missed face mask penalty last time.
Yeah.
So if the Vikings had won the game with a correctly called face mask penalty or lost the game on a lack of a face mask penalty, or if they themselves committed a face mask penalty, doubling down on the injury from several weeks ago, that would have been a much larger gut punch, I think. Like if the Vikings stop the Rams on fourth down, they're down one score, it's 4 points left in the game, the Vikings are up by 4, there's a minute left, the Rams are on fourth down, the Vikings get a sack, oh God, it's a face mask, oh God, the refs call it, the Rams have another chance, automatic first down, they drive for a touchdown. Look, and then you get a 20-second drive for a Will Reichert kick from 35 and he misses. That's gold, baby.
I think next time it's going to end up being a correctly called intentional grounding. That'll end up ending it. Like that's where all this is headed. Let's go to Kate, who asks, for a Reef's play caller corner, what's the deal with all those Aaron Jones attempts that went nowhere, but we just tried again and again and again? Isn't that the textbook definition of insanity, or am I the crazy one?
Shouts to Kate, by the way, apparently a new listener, and then like submitted like 8 questions. Fantastic. Love to see it. I don't know what the deal is with the Aaron Jones attempts, especially in the third and fourth quarter. It was actually somewhat successful in the first half. And I think the logic behind it is, if the Vikings are going to win, maybe it's going to be off of play action. I think it's too late for that, by the way. I don't really like that logic. But if I'm going to put myself into those shoes and attempt to justify it, it would be that you need some semblance of balance to prevent the Rams from kind of selling out for the pass, so that your passes can be more efficient. So it's not the runs themselves are going to accomplish what you want them to accomplish, although it would be nice if they'd gotten a couple more yards on some of those runs. It's rather that your ability to leverage the credibility of you running the ball is going to give you opportunities elsewhere. So I think that's the logic of it. It would have been nice if they had done that in the red zone the week prior. Again, it's so interesting that we're like complaining about them not running the ball the last week and running the ball this week, both justified. Just interesting that these are the nature of the complaints, because it feels like they're not finding ways to get the right balance offensively.
Yeah. We're right in both cases. We just want to make that abundantly clear.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah. Also from Kate, for a Reef's prophecy corner, number 1, what do now? 2, defense lineup. Can we cut Darnold loose and free up budget to yoink some fellas from hitting free agency? Please explain like I'm 5.
Yeah. So Darnold is on a voided contract, which means he's not going to be back. So you don't got to worry about, cutting him or anything like that. And that's going to free up some budget. The Vikings have an extraordinary amount of cap space in free agency. A lot of that is because of expiring contracts. So it's not as if, this is like a spend-a-palooza. As we mentioned, there's like a bunch of free agents. I don't think the Vikings should pursue all of those, but they've got about $70 million in cap space next year in terms of effective cap space. According to Over the Cap, it's 57. I think what they do is they subtract, because the Vikings only have 39 players under contract next year, which is the lowest. No, it's the second lowest in the NFL, ahead of the Chiefs. Third lowest, because the Commanders only have 32. But they have 39 players, and their effective cap space is to get up to 51, applying a minimum salary up to 51 players. So, $500,000 times 12 or whatever it is. So the effective cap space is about 57. Okay, great. That means that they're probably going to try to get Byron Murphy back. Again, I don't think it'll be Shaq Griffin, although he did play really well this year, or Stephon Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore was like, $10 to $12 million, something like that. But yeah, I mean, we probably will see Aaron Jones back. I would be surprised if they let him walk. We'll probably see, Cameron Bynum back and stuff like that. So a lot of it's going to be spent on internal free agents. They're all probably going to be announced before we get to March. I don't know that we'll see a franchise tag. If we do see a franchise tag, it'll be for Darnold. That'll be really funny, because then we just get to have this argument all over again. But yeah, we might get Harrison Smith back. That's up to him. He's technically a free agent off of a voided contract. But yeah, the nature of the Vikings cap space and free agency situation, it's not unique or anything like that, but they probably will not be able to spend in much the same way the Bears did over the last 2 off seasons, because the Bears didn't need to retain a lot of their players, and so they spent on incoming free agents. The Vikings will probably need to retain a number of their players, right? Like the Patriots, for example, they've got the most cap space in the NFL. They've got $120 million in cap space, 112 in effective cap space. So I imagine some incentives will kick in that'll change their effective cap space as well. And they don't need to retain a lot of their players. And so they will be able to spend a lot more than the Vikings will, even if they had been at the same effective cap space, because of the number of free agents that they have out there. But you don't need to cut Darnold loose. He's already on a voided contract. We talked a little bit about what do now. I don't know what defense lineup means, but I do think that they'll probably invest on the interior defensive line, because they don't really have much of a pass rush there. But I don't think it's a priority for the way the Vikings run this defense because of how blitz heavy it is. So it's not as important as it would be in like another scheme.
Do we feel like Flores has been read like a book?
No. I think that the Vikings went up against two quarterbacks uniquely good at beating the blitz. And while the Vikings have been very good at beating quarterbacks who are good against the blitz with their specific blitz packages, that includes Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. They didn't win against Justin Herbert last year, but they made him look worse against the blitz than he was without the blitz. And just over the last 2 years, they've been very good against quarterbacks that are good against the blitz. It's just these two, I think, have kind of figured out where the holes are on the blitz. You just have to be a little bit better about kind of determining that. And that's like kind of like you need more moments, like the moment Andrew Van Ginkel described on his pick against Aaron Rodgers, right? Where he knew how Aaron Rodgers would respond to that specific blitz, and he changed the landmark in his zone to get to the hot read, essentially. And he understood where that ball was going to go. You need more of that against people like Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. That's what you need to do. So I don't think he's been read like a book. I don't think his defense has been solved. If it had been solved, it would have been solved more than just by the best offense in the NFL and the fifth best offense in the NFL since the return of Puka Nacua. These quarterbacks just have a unique advantage against this particular setup that they need to be doing a little bit more accounting for.
I, for some reason, think it would be very funny to watch the Rams go against the Lions in the NFC Championship game. I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that.
I think it would be funny. I also think, and this is someone else's question, I also think the Rams are our best hope to beat the Lions.
It's very possible. The mailman asks, I find myself giving Kevin O'Connell a bigger piece of the blame pie than most are probably comfortable with, so I want to twist it slightly and serve some trust tort. If you have to win 3 games in a row, are you taking peak Kevin O'Connell with a league average quarterback or peak Darnold with a league average coach?
This is, I think, kind of I don't know about silly question, but it's a difficult one to answer because peak Darnold is a product of peak Kevin O'Connell, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know that you can get peak Darnold without Kevin O'Connell, especially if you're pairing with a league average coach. So I don't know that you're going to get the moments where after he throws a pick, he comes off the sideline and Kevin O'Connell says, don't change a thing. Or I don't know if you're going to get a game plan designed to leverage Darnold's unique advantages against other quarterbacks, like the propensity to chase explosives, right? The Vikings led the league in explosive play rate in the past, right? Like, I don't know that you're going to get that without specifically Kevin O'Connell. So I don't know that you can fully disaggregate the two. But peak Darnold, one that understands where pressure in the pocket is coming from, that has a decent sense of rhythm and timing. Again, not a critical component to the way that this offense necessarily works, but can operate well in a timing oriented offense. Understands matchups reasonably well, understands, anticipation reasonably well, is reasonably accurate, all that. And has a great arm. With a league average coach, I think a league average coach is not going to take advantage of those strengths. Peak Kevin O'Connell with a league average quarterback, I'm taking that guy. Absolutely. Because a league average quarterback with Kevin O'Connell is going to play better than Josh Dobbs did, is going to play better than probably Sam Darnold did, is going to play way better than Nick Mullins did. And the Vikings won most of those games. And those are bad quarterbacks. Again, I don't know how good Darnold is going to be going forward, so I can't say that he's a bad quarterback. But like, I've seen him with bad quarterbacks do well. Mm-hmm. I've actually yet to see him with an average quarterback because I thought Kirk Cousins, by the time he left anyway, was an above average quarterback that he turned into not a great quarterback, but a productively elite quarterback is maybe the best way to put it. Yeah, dude, I'm taking Pete Kevin O'Connell, the league average quarterback for sure.
Matt asks, what percentage of responsibility for yesterday's Sackapalooza does Sam Darnold himself deserve versus the offensive line?
I think we construct a blame pie, probably 75%. I think he was primarily responsible. Again, the offensive line didn't do him any favors. I think that they lost pretty quickly. I think that they forced him to move the pocket a lot. But quarterback pressures, quarterback hits, and quarterback sacks are primarily quarterback statistics anyway. But I think in this particular instance, they absolutely are, because he induced the pressure, he induced hits, and then he induced sacks by holding onto the ball. I do think that the offensive line did give up some quick pressures right away. Some of those quick pressures turned into sacks. But I think setting the protections, that's on Darnold. I think, getting rid of the ball quickly, a lot of that's on Darnold. So I'm going to say the majority of that's on Darnold.
Let's go to Mason, who asks, were there outlets for Darnold that he just didn't get to, or were there just not enough options for quick passes to beat the pressure? Please tell me it's all Darnold's fault so I don't have to worry if O'Connell isn't adaptable enough as a coach.
O'Connell is generally reasonably adaptable. You usually don't have to see it because he often enters in with a good game plan, so there's not really a lot of in-game adaptation that you need to see from him. So I don't think he's like the most flexible coach or anything like that. But he did make a lot of mistakes in this game. I think that, continuing to throw on 3rd and 4th and short for deep passes and not even allowing as many it's fine to put explosives into the play design. It's not great if on 4th and 2, you've got 3 deep routes and only 1 route running underneath. I think that that's really bad play design. And we saw, a good chunk of that in the game. I thought that, the Vikings' 4th down decision making was pretty curious. I understand, you got to grab the play. You haven't scored in 6 quarters or whatever. You got to get those points. You got to kick that field. No, you don't. That's not true. You're down by 2 scores already. You're about to be down by 3 scores. Why are you kicking field goals when you're in touchdown range? Go for it. It's not the 3 points doesn't feel good, right? The idea is that the 3 points motivates you enough that, now it doesn't feel like you've got a big goose egg on the scoreboard. It feels like your efforts are worth something. No, get points. You need to maximize points. So you don't go for it on 4th and 2 in the red zone. You later have to go for it on 4th and 2 from midfield, which that was a good decision. But like, I don't know. So I think that from a play design perspective and from a coach calling perspective, there were a lot of mistakes in that game. I still think it is primarily Darnold's fault. Again, had Darnold played excellently and we got the same game coaching quality, the game calling quality from the coaches, I don't think the Vikings win. So I'm not saying, but I think that the primary issue, the biggest factor in the Vikings loss was Sam Darnold playing poorly. And there were open receivers that he missed. He didn't go through his progressions quickly enough. Again, kind of a feature of the coaching. So I don't really want to, drive that nail down too deep. But I do think you did have open receivers that he missed fairly consistently, that he wasn't getting to quickly enough, that he used to get to a little bit quicker in other games. So you did have receivers getting open. I don't think they were getting open as much as we're used to seeing, especially against a defense that was not considered a top 5 defense. So that is a problem that needs to be addressed. But yeah, I think that's more on Darnold.
Mr. Ed asks, did Sam Darnold run himself out of Minnesota, and how much money has he lost on his next NFL contract?
Ed, this is not your fault. I kind of don't love the focus on how much money he lost. At some point, it just feels mean-spirited and personal. I don't know how else to put it. It's just like, dude, this is like, man, it's just so sad. The guy has had the confidence beaten out of him. He gets slowly built it up over the rest of the season, and then these 2 games happen. It just sucks. I think, had the games not materialized the way they would, if the Vikings had lost these 2 games, but Sam Darnold had played to the level that he had throughout the rest of the season, and the defense just happened to fail him, or special teams, or the offensive line, or whatever, receiver drops, whatever, right? If it was that, maybe he'd make $50 million, right? I think that his contract is going to be fine. It's not going to be $50 million, but I think it's going to be fine. I think I might be way overconfident on what his contract is going to be next season compared to what most people are saying. But I was confused about this during the game when people were like, yeah, he's going to make maybe $10 million again, maybe $13 million. And that's crazy to me. That's insane to me. The guy finished with a passer rating over 100 to end the season, right? He had 8 110 plus passer rating games. Passer rating, again, not a great measure of quality, but really good shorthand to demonstrate what I'm talking about, which is he was playing at that level, right? He had a couple of games above 120, 1 game above 150. He played really well. That's, I think he's fine. I think he's going to make more than 20 for sure. I think he can flirt with $30 million. I think it's weird that people are focused on specifically just these 2 games when they're talking about his contract, when he flourished for 15 out of the 18 games that he played. Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? Again, Ed, I'm not mad at you. This is a focus that has been produced by our media environment and by the way people think about high leverage games. And while a lot of NFL executives focus on how well did this guy play against my team, many NFL executives are focused on how well can we expect this guy to play based off of the balance of evidence we have. And Darnold played some lights out effing football.
Let's go to Alex. And we answered his first question already, but we'll go to the second one, who asks, do you think the Vikings re-sign Darnold on a similar contract to this year, since he just made his stock crash in the past 2 weeks? No.
I don't think so. I think he's looking for a starting job. Yeah. And I think he will find one. Bad free agency class for quarterbacks. I think I was looking at
very bad for draft too.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the quarterback class, and it's Jacoby Brissett. Because in terms of the highest paid quarterbacks right now, it's Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, Marcus Mariota, which Mariota might get a call. Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, who might get a call. Jarrett Stidham, Justin Fields, Joe Flacco, who's just going to be in reserve somewhere. Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Case Keenum. I'm looking through this, and I'm not finding a guy who's going to compete to be a starting quarterback.
You're even throwing safeties in there, so
right. Russell Wilson is probably going to get more money than he just made, $1.2 million. So yeah, someone may sign Russell Wilson, but Sam Darnold, I think, is by far the best quarterback here. There's only 2 quarterbacks in the draft that people are confident in right now that could turn into 3 based off of what happens in this whole offseason mess, right? JJ McCarthy turned from a second rounder into a first rounder. We ended up having 5 first round quarterbacks when we thought that there would be 3. So these things change. But right now, bad draft class, horrific free agency class. A lot of teams need a quarterback. I think he'll start somewhere. And so I think that the Vikings are not going to be that team.
Let's go to Beef Brewski, who asks, what are the odds the Vikings bring back Daniel Jones as a bridge quarterback?
Actually, I think kind of reasonable. I think it's weird that people are like, yeah, the Vikings will elevate him and then they'll get a compensatory for seeing him leave in free agency. And while that would be really awesome gamesmanship, I don't know what Daniel Jones did to improve his stock except just hang out with Kevin O'Connell, that's an insane leverage advantage for the Vikings if they can just have a guy on the team for 2 months that doesn't do anything, and then suddenly you get like a 4th round pick out of it. That's crazy. But I don't think he did anything. So I don't think the compensatory pick thing because the Vikings signed him to the practice squad for like $300,000. If a team wanted him, they could just give him a $2 million contract off of the Vikings practice squad, right? I mean, he's no longer on the practice squad, but you know what I mean? That's what? Why would that work?
He's not that much of a pariah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they'll bring him back because I think they like him.
Next question is from Yannick Eckhart, who asks, Will Reichard was drafted with a pick that was originally part of the Deshaun Watson trade. How do we uncurse him?
Has Will Reichard missed a kick since Deshaun Watson re-injured his ACL?
Yeah. Well, he re-injured his. It wasn't an ACL. It was his Achilles.
Oh, his Achilles.
And he re-injured it this weekend.
Yeah, and Will Reichard made both of his kicks. Right, he only had 2 kicks.
Yeah,
if I remember. Yeah, so we're good. Don't worry about it. Would you? Next time Will Reichard misses a couple of kicks in a short span of time, just someone shows up to Deshaun Watson's house and redacted.
Yeah, that's exactly how that works. Let's go to Sam, who asks, for James and Arif's internal reflections corner, on 3rd and 1, Kevin O'Connell will gladly drop a 7-second sail or flood concept when the situation calls for a run. Is it time to be concerned about Kevin O'Connell's offensive abilities? We often criticize coaches like Mike McDaniel for impressive regular season performance, but abysmal playoff output. Do we start to level that same criticism at Kevin O'Connell?
So the Vikings are in neutral situations, the 5th most pass-friendly team in the league, according to rbsdon'tmatter.com or rbsdm.com. And on 3rd and short, throw the ball at an 11% rate over the rest of the league, which is crazy. If you kind of filter out for win probability when you're more likely to throw the ball in some situations or run the ball in other situations, it actually increases to 13%. So that's kind of who he is. And I kind of like that he generally likes to pass the ball a lot, but I would love it if he modulated that for some of the situations where running the ball is genuinely better, like in the low red zone, like on 3rd and short. Should we be concerned about KOC's offensive abilities? No. If this is the cost of having a coach of the caliber of Kevin O'Connell, I'll take it. But this is a problem that I would like for him to resolve, right? Andy Reid eventually got better at clock management. I'd like Kevin O'Connell to get better faster than Andy Reid. It took him a bit of time. But all things kind of, being said, all things kind of put together and weighed on a scale, Kevin O'Connell is definitely much more worth it as an offensive coach than this proclivity to be, too obsessed with explosives on 3rd and 1, which, by the way, on 2nd and 1, he doesn't do, right? This is the other thing that bothers me. On 2nd and 1, the only instance, when you take a look at all the situational splits in rbsdm.com, and, apply the garbage time filter of the 95% to 5% win probability scenario. And you look at, 3rd and 1 and look at his pass rate, it's 13% over expected. If you look at 2nd and 1, he's always running the ball. In fact, it's the only place where he runs the ball more than the league average does on 2nd and 1. It blows my mind. That is the most efficient passing down in the NFL. And he doesn't throw the ball. So again, I'll take all of it, but like I would like to switch those two things around where I am. So that's that's where I'm at.
Let's go to Todd, who asks, why have we not been successful in upgrading our interior offensive line, other than throw money at an established free agency and cut our losses with Ingram, Brandell, Bradbury, Feeney, and Quessenberry/Cooper?
I don't know why they haven't been successful. Some of it, I think, is just poor scouting. Obviously, the Ed Ingram pick was a pretty bad one. That didn't work out. They've been pretty late to approach things in free agency. I think that they genuinely believed in Blake Brandell, which was a bad move. They wanted some holdovers from the previous roster. I think that was one of a number of factors that led to them maintaining Garrett Bradbury. I just think it's not been as big of a priority for them. I don't think that's a huge criticism. They had to prioritize, right? They had to spend money at cornerback. They probably didn't need to spend money and a draft pick on edge rusher. I understand why they did that, but you have to pick your poison, kind of, and they kind of let this one go a little bit. So I think that's kind of why. But I don't think that they ignored it, right? That's the Ed Ingram pick. I just think that when they did make the light investments they just made mistakes.
Next question is from Bottoms Up Socrates. I like that name. Apparently, players can now plead to referees what their intent was during a play instead of what actually happened. Who could the Vikings use as their representative for this new wrinkle? Is it Josh Metellus, since he already does so much? Would a background in debate be helpful?
It depends on the kind of debate. As somebody who did policy debate, I would not want a policy debater to be that guy.
No, that would not work well.
Right. I strongly believe policy debate is the best kind of debate, but persuading people is actually not the thing that it's good at teaching you to do. So let's not do that. If it's Lincoln Douglas, it depends on if you're a national circuit or not. If you're a local Lincoln Douglas debater, I actually kind of want that guy a little bit more than a national circuit Lincoln Douglas debater. But if you had a background in speech, right, that matters way more than this debate stuff, right? Extemporaneous speaking, original oratory, doesn't matter. That would be better. But currently on the team, I would say Cameron Bynum, because he's so charismatic. Josh Metellus, because he does a really great job breaking down to the media, kind of like what he's thinking and what the Vikings, are generally thinking. I think those two are probably your best bets. I'm trying to think. Harrison Phillips is charismatic, but I don't know that he's a persuasive kind of charismatic. Yeah, I think Josh Metellus, and I think you picked him because he's a do-everything guy, but I picked him because he's like probably the most articulate member of the defense, and that's not like a damning by faint praise. I think he's a really good speaker. No,
you definitely wouldn't want a policy debater back there. That's basically just weaponized bullying. And,
yeah. And you don't want a Harrison Smith or anything like that. You want somebody who wants to talk to people.
Let's go to Kenneth Allen, who asks for James's spite corner. We're about to go off the cliff here. For James's spite corner, I'm a sore loser and a spiteful man who cannot handle the Lions winning a Super Bowl before us. Given that, which teams should I root for, i.e. which teams have the best shot at beating the Lions specifically? You had said the Rams. I think that if the Ravens are clicking and have solved their defensive problems, they are dangerous.
Oh, yeah. So I think from an AFC, so I was only thinking about NFC teams. And I was thinking about specifically NFC teams that are good against the blitz when they're on offense and don't need to blitz when they're on defense. Is kind of the way I was thinking about that, and have a reasonable run defense. And so the Rams, as we just saw, don't need to blitz and are good at beating the blitz, which is kind of the way the Lions construct themselves. So that's why I liked the Rams here. I think the Commanders are probably my second choice. Certainly not the Eagles, who did not look impressive against the Packers in their win. And also, I've talked about kind of what I think their issues are. I don't think they're very good necessarily against the blitz. I don't think that their offense is uniquely designed to stop the Lions defense. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is good. Obviously, Jalen Hurts does some good things, but I think that when you look at teams that don't need to blitz a lot and also can beat the blitz a fair amount. I think I'd go Rams first, Washington second. In the AFC, I love the Bills. I love the Ravens. Those are the two teams I think would be best positioned to. We're probably going to get the Chiefs. So, prepare for that, I guess.
And so write that one down. Also from Kenneth Allen for Arif's Theology Corner, which we don't spend enough time in, quite frankly.
I disagree, but go on.
The Vikings don't just lose games like this. They always lose in embarrassing and historic ways. Is this proof that there is a divine creator and that we are his enemy? If so, quick follow-up. How do we kill God?
Okay, so there are a lot of instances and a lot of mythological constructs where gods do not necessarily hate someone when they punish them. I think the most famous example of that is Job.
Job is the first place you go.
Yeah. So, it is not necessarily the case that is true, although there are other mythologies where someone is heavily punished because some gods hate that guy a lot. Odysseus, right? That exists across the spectrum. So I don't think this is necessarily proof of a divine being or that the divine being hates us. But to answer your second question, there are a number of story constructions where a god's power comes from the people's belief in them. One of the most prominent creators of such a story, which he doesn't own the rights to that belief. I mean, like as an 8-year-old, I thought of that belief. Like it's not a unique belief, right? But because the most famous example is someone who got so insanely mega canceled, I don't even want to say his name anymore, like this past weekend. We're just going to go to the God of War franchise and say it's with an axe.
If we're going with the fourth Thor movie, which no one should ever go with the fourth Thor movie, there's a blade that could work for that. If you're ever curious as to whether or not you should watch the fourth Thor movie, just remember that there's an army of children. There's a child army in a non-ironic way.
Excellent. And, that's great. What's the name of the fourth Thor movie? Did I miss it?
Love and Thunder.
Oh, I didn't miss it. Yeah, no, you're right. There's
you and I had a conversation about it on the pod because I'd seen it in theaters and I went, you need to know that this is a thing. That there's an unironic child, like a child army. And it hurt. Things did not go well. I enjoy that the director who said later, we might have gone too far. We might have tried too hard for laughs. We might have gone too far in this comic book movie about killing gods and creatures. Marshall asks for a Reef's blood sacrifice corner. Is it correct to say that the Rams sacrificed the Vikings on national television as an offering to appease the powers that be to spare LA from the inferno?
Jesus. Sure. And that's probably worth it, right? I think both Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, who are from from Southern California, would be okay with that.
Cam Xstorm asks, for the magic corner, I read that some considered water to be a conduit between the physical and spiritual worlds. Is it possible that the water bottle shower celebration after the Packers game allowed Sam Darnold's ghost, presumably banished by Kevin O'Connell, to repossess Darnold for the Lions and Rams games? And are there examples of teams being able to address 2 or 3 weak spots in an interior offensive line in an offseason?
This can't have been the first time Sam Darnold was drenched with water, right? That's ridiculous. So presumably what had happened was that the water bottle shower celebration also included some ritual actions that imitated the rites that allow water to kind of breach the barriers between the two worlds, because it can't just be the existence of water. So that's probably what happened. Second, the 2021 Chiefs did a really great job of addressing 2 weak spots in the interior offensive line and 1 spot on the offensive line in general outside of that, so a tackle. So they drafted Creed Humphrey, great move. They signed Joe Thuney in free agency. Fantastic move. They also signed Chris Long, I guess. Who cares? That didn't matter. But they did trade for Orlando Brown, who played really well, but they were happy to see him go as well. So that's probably I was kind of racking my brain through like pretty good interior offensive lines, whether or not they'd all been constructed. I may have missed 1 or 2, so I could be wrong there, but I do think that that's probably the best example of a team kind of turning things around along the interior offensive line. Like I think they still had Trey Smith, so there are a couple of things there, but The 2020 Chiefs, bad offensive line, famously the reason that a lot of people think that they lost to the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. Fair enough. And the Chiefs believe that too. And so they were like, well, the Tyreek stuff, that's expensive. So we'll just get rid of him and we'll just add a bunch of other people along the offensive line. That's what they did. And then the Chiefs won another Super Bowl. Great. Good for them.
Please Once Before I Die asks, for Arif's psychoanalysis and mythology corner. I don't think we spend enough time at the mythology. Enough at the psychoanalysis, though. I discovered the news of the Vikings reselling Lions tickets last Saturday night, and like any good masochist, I was thrilled to pay $200, forgetting all my pending obligations in life to drive 5 hours to Detroit. Needless to say, I was not thrilled on my drive home, but thoroughly appreciated the nuanced discussion on Norse code comparing the suffering between Lions and Vikings fans. I'm only 33 and began watching football at age 7 during the 98 season, being exposed to the most horrific of Vikings traumas in my football infancy, followed by the last 25 years has conditioned me perfectly to fear hope. However, I don't think I would trade the past 25 years for that of the Lions fans' existence, and it did lead me to some interesting hypotheticals. In the next 25 years, would you rather experience 5 Anderson/Favre/Wolf level devastation scenarios on great teams, with each one having a 10% chance of actually succeeding and leading to a Super Bowl, and a 90% chance of devastation, or 20 years of below 500 play, followed by 5 years of dominance and a 12% shot at winning the Super Bowl at the start of each year for 5 years straight in a relatively normal but dominant fashion? Should go without saying that in both scenarios, you can win multiple Super Bowls or none. And he's not just referring to the Super Bowls you get from beating the Packers.
I'm doing some super quick calculator math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the Lions scenario, which is the scenario where you're more likely to win at least one Super Bowl, you've got a 53% chance of winning a Super Bowl. In the Vikings Super Bowl scenario, let's see. I think I did the math wrong. That seems wrong. Cool. I did the math wrong. Let me try it again.
I'm looking forward to you attempting to do the math wrong one more time, just for funsies. I'm not editing this out. I'm keeping your awkwardness in.
Great. That's fantastic. I don't know how to do math.
Big if true. Big if true.
Big if true. Okay, so the chances of the Lions not winning a Super Bowl in each of those 5 years is 88%. The chance of the Vikings not winning a Super Bowl in each of those years is 90%. I did the math backwards, actually. So the Lions actually have a 47.3% chance of winning a Super Bowl in that scenario, whereas the Vikings have a 47% chance in general to win the Super Bowl. So the chances of winning a Super Bowl are actually, the differences between the two are relatively minuscule, right? The Lions have a slightly higher percent chance of winning at least one Super Bowl in that scenario. I had to take my final thing and subtract it by 1. That's why I did it wrong. So I would rather have the Viking scenario, actually. I think that this is really interesting because the 5 years of dominance are really fun. But I think that having that history behind you with the Anderson and the Favre, the Walsh stuff, I think is really special. Like, what do Lions fans talk about? 0-16? They talk about how great Barry Sanders would have been 30 years ago. Like, Calvin Johnson got robbed. What would have happened?
Yeah, what would have happened if we would have managed to keep Calvin Johnson in the building?
Yeah, like those are real touchstones for a Lions fan base, 100%. I think that the conversations the Vikings fans have about their own history are much more exciting. Sorry, Lions fans, are much more exciting and bring people together and are much more fun to have experienced, even though the pain is greater. Because I think that greater touchstone, right? That I think that these larger moments of pain, I think bring you together in ways that a 5-year run doesn't, and really make that Super Bowl win. Because again, these are virtually identical Super Bowl odds. Make the Super Bowl run that occurs, which is like a 40% chance, right? that much more meaningful, I guess, because I think there's not like I think people assign an infinite value to Super Bowls, like in terms of like your ultimate goal is to win a Super Bowl, right? And the way we talk about how the Rams handled the Stafford trade makes it seem like that's the case. And again, because they won a Super Bowl, I think we're all kind of correct in saying it was justified. But I don't think that the Patriots' fourth Super Bowl was more special than the first one, right? And so we know that there's a differential value in these Super Bowls, and I think that the Vikings' first Super Bowl. The Lions for Super Bowl, if it ever happens, is going to mean the world. It's going to mean a ton. It's going to mean a lot. I'm not saying that it won't. And the Vikings Super Bowl is going to mean a little bit more.
Let's go to Skimbleshanks, the Railway Cat, who asks, for Reef's coach trade corner, who says no to sending Flores to Pittsburgh to be their head coach in exchange for Tomlin to be our defensive coordinator?
I mean, me. But I don't know that like everybody in Pittsburgh I know that covers Tomlin doesn't like him and wants him gone. Everybody I know that covers in Minnesota that covers Flores likes him and wants him here. I think that there's something weird about this Tomlin stuff, about the head coach stuff, where everybody in Pittsburgh wants him gone, and I think that they're a little bit too spoiled or whatever over there. But I would rather have Flores.
All right, these were sent in right after each game, so just take a moment and enjoy this. Actually, let's knock this out first. From Arif's 8th grade crush.
God,
not a reference to a Norse code thing. For Arif's open your heart corner. What the hell, man? I thought we were buds.
We are. Also, hey, what's up? Sorry I called you out like that in the Minnesota football party. I don't think I even called you out. You did probably not much more wrong than I did. We were both in 8th grade. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you got to open up your heart. Also, hey, it's like 25 years ago, you could have opened up your heart.
Jesus. That was no. Not even I could have pulled that off. Let's go to the 2 questions that came in after each game. Question for Arif's takes corner. With the Broncos season over, how are you feeling about your Bo Nix takes?
Great. Fantastic. I said that I took an insane L on my Bo Nix takes after that like long pass, was like a 43-yard pass or whatever. He was bad, and he threw for like 4 yards an attempt after that pass. It was fine. A bunch of football heads quote tweeted it with saying, actually, no, I think he's still bad and I don't believe in him. So I'm going to smoke the copium and say, yeah, no, I'm right. I'm not going to elaborate. I'm right.
No, you're good. While we're on the topic, question for Arif's takes corner. With Green Bay's season over, how are you feeling about your Jordan Love takes?
Fantastic. Wow. Holy crap. Incredible work, Arif.
That worked out. What an awful game for him. Room Don Sharif asks, do we hold the record for the worst 13 and 14 win teams ever?
First of all, what fantastic news that you moved on from Bull Sharif to Don. No, actually, my name is still in there. I don't love that. Weird. The whole everything is weird about that. Second, I looked at the worst 13, 14, 15 win teams by point differential. So the 2022 Vikings were the worst 13 win team. I think we can all agree that makes sense. I know that point differential isn't great. There's a previous piece over at Wide Left that indicates that point differential is good but not great, and there are greater ways to do that, and the Vikings actually look a lot better when you adjust for those kinds of things. Fine. The 2019 Packers are third on that list of worst 13-win teams. Awesome. The Kansas City Chiefs are the worst 15-win team and second overall in 13-plus win teams by point differential. So that's fascinating, of course. This year's Kansas City Chiefs. The 99 Titans, who, if I remember correctly, had one of the best defenses in NFL history, are fourth. The 21 Packers are fifth. The 99 Colts are sixth. The 17 Steelers are seventh. And the 2024 Vikings, who I think are better than their point differential, are eighth. So I don't actually think they come close to the worst. But it's interesting that this happens a lot more in the 2000s than the 90s, and the 90s than the 80s, and the 80s than the 70s, because this search was actually to go all the way back to 1972. And I only got modern teams plus the 99 Colts. You go down, you see another 90s team, maybe 2 more 90s teams, then you get an 80s team. So it's kind of interesting that low point differential, high win teams have occurred a lot more recently, even though we've been in the 16 game, now 17 game era for longer.
Also, let's go to Don Bolsh or Don the Don Sharifs. If you had to pick an album to sum up the season, which album would it be?
So I went through my Sad Boy 90s playlist, which you all know of and I won't share. And I tried to find an album that kind of fit in terms of the overall tenor and positioning of it, like the way the album flows and how you feel at the beginning and the end. And the title doesn't work here, but it's Semisonic's Feeling Strangely Fine. That's the one that the song comes from, Closing Time, that everyone knows. But Dan Wilson is a genius. He's a fantastic songwriter. So I encourage you to listen to Semisonic's 3 albums that were the biggest hits. Chemistry is a great album. But Feeling Strangely Fine starts out really upbeat and fun and doesn't get slow and sad until the final 2 songs in the track. And I'm not talking about the B-sides, because that goes, much further. And the final song on the album is California. And so I feel like that really fits. So that's what I'm going with.
I'm not feeling as inspired. So I was going to pull out some really great obscure thing, and the closest thing I had was going to be this Ramshackle Glory, and I thought I couldn't remember if it was a song or if it was an album. It turns out it's just a song. The song was called Collapse, Fury, Redemption, and Loss, and I liked that.
All right, yeah,
I liked that as a theme. I thought that was the album, and it wasn't. But I'm going to go with that and break the rules and have fun with it. Damien asked, do we use up too many of our wins in the regular season?
Yeah, come on. You know that's not how it works. Also, yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Calavelon asks, for Arif's tortured fan base corner, how high on the creativity scale does this year's Heartbreak rank?
Not that high. Again, I thought that there were a lot of things that they'd set up early in the season that would have been great. Callbacks, great, kind of loose ends to drive home the heartbreak. I thought it was just a cliche to use the seeing ghost stuff, honestly. So
the California thing was an interesting wrinkle. I will say that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like a great setup, honestly. Like in moving the game to Glendale, awesome from a story writing perspective. But geez, ghosts? Yeah, that's boring.
Yeah. Ghosts and fire. No.
Yeah.
No. Ingram's Left Foot again asks, can Arif please provide us with a sumo comp for this season? Who had a great season only to soil their Mahawashi in front of the entire nation when it mattered most twice?
I think the Rishiki that we've been talking about a lot this season, probably the most, is Onosato. Who had a pretty great year until the November Basho, when a lot of people thought he'd finally be able to make his case for being kind of considered for Yokozuna, right? Because he'd gone 11-4 in March, 12-3 in May, had a small dip in July with a 9-6 record, but then goes 13-2. And then in the November Basho goes 9-6 again, losing to Hoshoryu and Kurosakura, 2 also Yokozuna candidates. You can't be doing that. You can't be losing to people who are bouncing in and out of Ozeki consideration. People like Abi, WTK. The November performance was a collapse. We talked about him at the very beginning of the Sumo Corner, and he was this rising star, maybe one of the youngest Yokozuna we were ever going to see. And it's just been falling. Like he won awards in all of the previous Bashos this year. He won the Fighting Spirit Award, the Technique Prize. He won the Outstanding Performance Award a couple of times. So he had 2 Fighting Spirit prizes, I think 3 Technique prizes, 2 Outstanding Performance prizes this year. Actually, 3 Fighting Spirit prizes, and then he got nothing in the November Basho. It was just fell flat at the end. So I think Onosato has to be the one.
Dees asks, now that James has fully embraced the bit, for the Norse Code live show corner, where in Japan do you most want to host your next live show from, and how many tickets did Arif secure from that guy offering them?
Yes.
That was great. That was fantastic, actually. There was a fellow on, I believe it was Twitter. It might have been Blue Sky, but I believe it was Twitter who had offered Arif tickets to the sumo shows in Japan.
So that guy and I DM each other because I think it's Jeff. That guy and I DM each other every so often. He's serious about that offer, by the way.
Oh, I absolutely. You know what? Maybe my problem is I've been trying to fly east and not west. Maybe Japan is. I was about to say I'm big in Japan, and that's a terrible pun, but like that's where everything is. That's where all signs are pointing. That's the end of the show. Like,
yes, we could just end the show, collapse it.
Yeah, that's it. We call it good. We finish up in 2025. That's it. James successfully goes international, and that's it. Tankby asks for Arif's personal growth corner. While I'm disappointed in the losses and the way that it happened, and ultimately the end of our season, but otherwise I feel fine. I enjoyed the season for the most part, more than I have in recent years, and even on bad games, I just didn't feel myself fall into the same mental states that I normally would have. Have I made some personal growth, or have I actually reached a new black-pilled level of fandom?
Are we sure that those are different things?
That is an excellent question. I don't like that at all.
Let's go with personal growth.
I did find it funny that I accidentally scheduled I say accidentally. It was not intentional. I scheduled a therapist appointment for this morning, so I could walk into work feeling fine, like just dealing with it and stuff. So I will take that. But we got about 2 more questions here. Kevin asks, now that this Vikings season is over, what New Year's resolutions should Arif look to focus on to make himself a better person? May I suggest being nicer to his co-hosts and friends like yourself and Sam Ekstrom? It's obvious being a Vikings fan and covering the team is affecting his overall well-being.
I do not intend on becoming a better person.
No, that was never part of the character arc.
Yeah.
Never.
Sorry, you're barking up the wrong tree here.
No, never once. Not going to happen. I'm not holding my breath. Don from Ohio ends this episode of Norse Code with for James and Arif's malevolent corner. For all the wonderful things Norse Code has done for me over the years, I decided to bring my Norse Code t-shirt to the Lions-Vikings game, not only for good luck, but to get you some free publicity on network TV when the Vikings would score in our end of the field. Not only did we lose the game, but almost all the scoring was at the opposite end of the field. This seems impossible, as if an evil spirit was looking over us. Well, we flew to Phoenix yesterday with the same Norse Code t-shirt, ready to cheer our team on and give you guys free publicity. For some unknown reason, we were pulled aside by TSA agents and asked to have our luggage checked. When they came across your shirt, the police dog sniffed it and began violently dry heaving and having strong convulsions. We were locked up in the airport jail for several hours and questioned. What was the t-shirt made of to cause great discomfort to the poor dog? Also, my question, what third world country were these t-shirts made in? And what are these t-shirts made of? Blood of ginger children.
Okay, first of all, Don, I know you hate gingers. You would love for the t-shirts to be made in that fashion. Second, most of the t-shirts you buy are made from countries that are not the United States. This is not unique to any shirt that we make, and also I have no idea where the shirts are made. Maybe we should check in on that.
Let me just threadless.com.
What's the? I almost guaranteed to be better than Shein shirts, so I'm fine. But finally, I think, Dawn, actually what happened was you don't wash your clothes. And I think that's why the dog started dry heaving instead of like barking, were it the drugs or something like that you typically bring. So I think you just don't wash your clothes. And I think that's the problem here.
So I'm looking here and...
Where are they made?
Well, that's an excellent question. It looks like
are threadless.
It looks like they are made in America.
Okay, but like, where are they really made? The printing is done in the United States. Okay. Yes. So okay, but that doesn't mean that. But that doesn't mean that the textile manufacturing part of the process is in the United States. The home goods and accessories like the blankets are American made.
Mm-hmm.
And the teas that are made overseas are manufactured according to International Labor Organization conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just check the Gildan website maybe. Wherever Gildan shirts are made.
This is God damn it, Don, you're making us work.
Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we're about to get canceled, huh?
Central America, the Caribbean, the United States, and Bangladesh.
Oh, well, a ton of shirts are made in Bangladesh.
Yeah. They're a Canadian multinational apparel manufacturer that owns and operates.
Okay, so our shirts are probably made in Honduras.
Oh, fantastic. Well, there's your answer, Don. I don't feel better about that.
Well, I never do after a Don question.
No, I don't feel better. All right, well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, we will be adjusting back to about once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks during the off season as we get closer to August and all of that. So look out for our next episode. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yeah, so my last 3 game pieces have been really well received, which is really nice to hear. And my most recent one is about kind of why people remain fans of teams that continue to hurt them. I think I've hit on something. A lot of people feel like they've connected to the piece when it talks about kind of shared bonds and community. I do quote Drew McGarry at length, so he wrote basically half my piece. Sorry, Drew. But that piece is over at Wide Left. I've got a couple of pieces about kind of being the kind of team that fears hope. That's the post Lions piece, as well as a team that you want to believe in. That's the post Packers piece. Head over to wideleft.football for that. If you want a primer on the Brian Flores defense, we've got that over there. Ben Natan is going to be writing a piece next week. It's purely politics. It doesn't have anything to do with football. It's about like the anti-trans legislation that we might be seeing in the upcoming administration, that kind of stuff. So head over to wideleft.football. We've got a lot of kind of breakdowns there, sociological explorations of what it means to be a fan, X's and O's, scouting report on Sam Darnold, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back soon with more episodes, but I'm breaking it out. I haven't broken it out in a while. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And it appears the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... And he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.